was amazing. I just can't believe how well organised it is. I mean, it's like I'm in New York or London.
This is an area that's going to see so many good startups coming out of this area over the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
This is the perfect size, where you have some really great speakers and you also have so many interesting startups that are presenting and a really great whole entire floor to walk through.
Hey people! So today is the third day of UX Tartu, and we're back here online, live, here in the RGB Baltic studio. And important to mention that this is the fourth time UX Tartu is happening, and it's the official side event of Startup Day. Please mark your calendars, 27th to 29th of January next year, 2021. Startup Day is going to happen the fifth time, so you are going to be there, or you're going to be there. So 2 options. Our awesome partners who are helping us to organize UX Tartu, of course, Startup Day, Velvet, we have Startup Estonia helping us a lot, production done by RGB Baltic. All those you can also find in Brella in the demo area, where you can also find other cool companies and startups putting their job offers there. So definitely go to Brella, check out all these awesome opportunities there. What else you can do in Brella? Matchmaking. Don't forget to matchmake. Afterwards, after each presentation, you will have 2 hours to cherry pick up those leads you want to be contacted to. Use this time wisely. Q&A. If you want to ask questions from the speakers, then please also use the Brella chat box there and ask your questions. We will later then just choose those questions from there. Very important, as we have mentioned already for the past 2 days. So UX Tartu is a free event, but we did choose to donate with your help to Estonian Blind Union. Please, Jakob Rosin, tell us about what you're up to.
Hello, my name is Jakob Rosin. I'm the chairman of Estonian Blind Union. We're the umbrella organization of blind and visually impaired people's organizations across Estonia. There's 16 of them, both national and local. I'm sure all of you know the benefits of modern technology and smartphones. You can book cabs, you can order food, read internet and news, watch TV shows, talk to your friends and colleagues. Unfortunately, this technology and those solutions are largely inaccessible for many blind people. Don't get me wrong, there are assistive technology solutions built into our smartphones today, anybody can use. But they are rather complicated and hard to grasp for people who are not technologically that advanced. So we are planning a series of courses to teach blind and visually impaired people the accessibility solutions in modern technology and ways they can use them to enhance their daily lives. If you want to help us out in buying equipment and providing those courses, feel free to give us a little donation. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jakob. You can donate also, you can find the donation link in Brella, and you can do it via PayPal or bank transfer. So use those opportunities to help Estonian Blind Union. Now to the program. We have had already 2 awesome presentations. The first one from Bilgi Karan from IKEA, and then the second one from Valdma from Producement. And I think that they really do complement each other in a very nice way, that Bilgi was more inspirational, Jordan was very, very practical, and you can get a lot of tips from both of them. Tomorrow we will have Jakob Rosin talking about his experience from the user experience perspective. And on Friday we have Jamshid Alamuti. And now, let's give a round of applause, a virtual applause to our next speaker. Yoo-hoo! Sami Niemela from Nordcup. So I think that it's very important that you know what to focus on. So he's the strategic designer, the founder of Nordcup, and he's also the whole Nordcup philosophy is about helping companies think of innovations from the future perspective and to think of design as a strategic element. So Sami is going to tell you about how to build futures. Sami, the floor is yours.
Hey guys. Thank you so much for inviting me here to talk at UX Tartu, even virtually. And I think it's, from the looks of it, it's been an incredible lineup. And I hope to be worthy of that as well. So, my name is Sami, and I'm gonna be talking about building futures. So, a bit of like what's to come for design, and not about UX design per se, but more about what is design in 2020 and beyond. So, in 2008, German architect Jakob Tigges had an idea. The city of Berlin was looking for proposals for the Tempelhof airport, and Jakob decided that, well, Berlin's got pretty much everything, like great clubs, good atmosphere, nice people, etc. But they are missing a mountain. So he proposed a plan for 1,000 meter high mountain called the Berg, obviously. And his idea was that this would be never before seen tourist destination for Berlin, the German capital city. So they went pretty far with the proposal. So they had these elaborate plans with like microclimates for the Berg. And they had like pretty well done renderings of how this gigantic mountain in the middle of the city would look like. Sadly, for some reason, didn't happen. But it was a good story, and I think what reason why I show this to you is that the stories resonate with people. And especially now, when we are approximately, give or take, 120th day of global public health emergency, hopefully about to push beyond the worst in many countries now. So stories matter more than ever. So Alvin Toffler wrote a book called Future Shock in 1970. The name literally describes what happens when things happen way too fast and in wrong order. So I've used this in my talks many times before, but now it's like even more kind of, I don't know, like we weren't really ready for where we are right now, just a couple of months ago. So kind of another example I've been using, so kind of usually there's a gap between vision and implementation, and that's especially visible in concept cars. So here's a Toyota Concept i 2020 and then Toyota Prius 2020. So I don't know what happened with the doors, but there's something quite not there yet. And obviously this goes very deep into supply chains and all that stuff. But where we are right now, it's kind of like this additional curveball. Like, holy shit, where are we? What can we do about it? What should we do about it? And there's a lot of interesting things going on in the world right now. So it's not all doom and gloom. But American growth company Peloton, basically, if you don't know the company, they run these connected treadmills and connected exercise bikes. Just a couple of weeks ago, they run an online class, live class, with 23,000 simultaneous exercises at one go. So basically, a full-on stadium full of people exercising with their bikes. And this is basically what their infrastructure looks like. So it's essentially, yes, they're a startup, they do bikes with a screen on them, but why they're so successful is about the production value and the content. Literally all the classes they have are full-on movie production quality. So another example, so I mean, we all basically are very deep in the trenches of Zoom fatigue, probably at the moment, at least I am. Because for some reason, the virtual meetings actually seem to be more taxing for us. Because we miss the body language. We miss all the other cues we often see in a conversation in a face-to-face room type of situation. But then this is all kind of whole new behaviors emerging. So Zoom raves, obviously, that's the thing. Zoom happy hours. And live exercise classes. But here's a quote from a researcher that I was in Zoom rave this weekend, but it was fun, but it's kind of like work. Yeah, so. And Fortnite, the game by Epic Games, they hosted a live performance of the rapper Travis Scott. So he had, whereas Peloton attracted 23,000 people, Fortnite and Travis Scott had 12.3 million people live simultaneously. So there's been a couple of comments that it's fair to say live kind of virtual distributed performances are not the same anymore. This changed everything. And they ranked in like 27.7 views total over 5 replays on Fortnite. So that's like pretty massive numbers, right? And there's like, obviously there's plenty of stuff going around. So a lot of like sports companies, they're repurposing their gear into medical gowns. A lot of companies doing masks and whatnot. And then there's like a ton of like concept ideas around as well. So flying, for example, might change forever, but we don't know how. And the question here is that is no one actually questioning why should we fly that much? But that's kind of like the for me that's the hard question here. I don't know. But this was true before the pandemic. This is true still. So people don't really care about the future, right? So only few people think about the distant future, but most of us are focused on our daily lives. So basically, polled by Pew Research Center in the US, found that 44% of Americans were pessimistic about what lies ahead. So they kind of like, they didn't believe in the future. And sort of one big task for us as designers is not just to make good products, but we need to start figuring out how to actually help people and organizations to own the future and not kind of like develop their own vision, sense of purpose, and then driving towards that. I'll come back to this in a few minutes. And another question is like how to make sure that we are actually solving the right problems to begin with. So William Gibson said in an interview recently that every future is someone else's past and every present is someone else's future. So when we talk about future, we need to first understand what we talk about. So basically, for example, a lot of design companies talk about, well, yes, we make the future, we make the world a better place. Yes, true, but when you think of it, all design lives in the future. Everything we create as designers is in the future. But what matters is how far, right? So the complexity of what we do, what we imagine, what we create increases. So we need to learn new skills. So every presentation needs to have 3 points. So here are mine. So basically, the core skills we need as designers are things like improvisation. So we need to be able to trust our gut enough to think on our feet. We need to balance that with strategic foresight. So figure out what lies ahead and how to approach that. And that is done by sense making and systems thinking. And then when we do that, that leads into continuous learning and reflection. Right. I will repeat this later on, don't worry. So basically, how futures work is that they are inevitable. They happen. The future comes one way or another. And future comes, but for us, futures are always plural, right? So technology is inevitable. So technology basically grows as more slow. So we can fit more transistors on a microchip. and get more powerful computers. And that happens through very complicated systems, through IPR, market and whatnot. So basically technology is developing all the time. The progress there is inevitable. So for us designers, we need to figure out how to make all these features human. And they are made human by the choices we make now. So where this gets complex is that, I mean, we've gone beyond the hero designer for a long time ago, I hope. But we now need to go beyond the idea that there's going to be one single solution. There's not going to be a silver bullet. We're dealing with wicked problems which are complex by nature, and also by nature they don't have one single answer. So building futures is a systemic challenge, right? So basically take electric cars. So in the previous picture, Tesla, in order to run, it needs charging stations. In order to be popular, the charging stations need to be fairly ubiquitous. You need to be able to get a charging station on your own garage, etc., etc. And I mean, the energy needs to come from somewhere, right? So it's pretty complex. So that forms a sort of like stack of tiny solutions that all of them, they combine and solve one small part of the problem, which then becomes systemic, complex, complicated solution. And I mean, ideas like simplicity are really nice ideals to strive towards to, but they are more like subset of an experience. So when we build complex things like AI and machine learning, we need to understand that there are layers and layers of complex decisions, data, and whatnot, in order to make, for example, a car drive by itself. So here's something interesting. How Elisa Jagari is a professor at Delft University. So she leads the Connected Everyday Lab. So basically, she kind of like, a while ago, she verbalized something I was thinking about. So basically, when we deal with complex technologies like AI and machine learning, so we are basically entering ourselves into new territory of design. So there's no best practices, because what we design it doesn't really actually exist anymore. So we have to at best make the technology to make the solution. So in order to us designers be employable, survive, we need to figure out new human skills like improvisation and foresight. Again, so new materials require new strategies. For example, this in the background, that's something I made with a friend of mine, Simon Rabarengo, to Shenzhen in an art exhibition a year ago. So we took a bunch of data products from Alibaba, then ran them through a neural network, which then the neural network, we trained that on Nordic design, Scandinavian design ideals, and the network started writing us design briefs, right? So when we embarked on the journey, we kind of had an idea what the end result is going to be like, but then we had no idea. We basically just went along with it, facilitated the algorithm, facilitated and curated what was going on inside the neural network. And that eventually came into sort of sensible design ideas, which we then wrote in the briefs and gave on to human industrial designers. And of course, the products were manufactured in China and put out on a display in an exhibition. But this sort of there is no process to do this stuff. You need to be able to figure out stuff while you go. Another angle, so Anthony Down and Fiona Raby, they ran the Design Interactions program in RCA in London for a long time. And they've been considered as the parents of the whole speculative design genre. So they had this graph called AB, defining what they mean by speculative design. So that's pretty interesting. So basically, design needs to move from problem solving to problem finding, right? Small but really important difference. We need to move from concept design to conceptual design. So we basically need to move from innovation to provocation and from ergonomics to rhetoric. So basically, in order for us to understand what could the futures be like, we need to start designing probes of those futures and artifacts that might one day live with us. Of course, when we do them from our current knowledge, they probably will be funny and fairly limited based on when we arrive at the actual year and the future. But they're very useful for us as a provocations, as probes, to understand how people will react to things like that. So I'm honored to sort of share the bill with Bilgi from IKEA. So I had to include it. So this is not an IKEA catalog, by the way. So it's a future IKEA catalog from Near Future Laboratory some years ago. So they basically made this kind of smart everyday of many people, just I think roughly 7-8 years ago. And it's a real IKEA printed catalog, but with connected objects like smart tabletops and all that kind of stuff. They even left it out in Santa Monica IKEA, just like for people to pick up and see what the hell is all about. So provocations, design fictions of an ideas that might be. So basically, how this works, follow me here. So I'm gonna mash together a bit of complexity theory, kind of in foresight, strategic design, and all kinds of stuff. And it will make sense in the end, I promise. So basically, foresight and futures, the futures are always in a state of chaos and disorder because they're natural. Entropy is a state of nature. But then by using the tools of foresight, future studies, using the tools of strategy design, sense making, we can actually spot opportunities in there. And then these opportunities can then be turned into solutions. That's where we enter the sort of like the product design, service design. That's where we start to do the usual things we do. But this is important because like how futures work, that like I said, there is no one single future. There are probable, plausible futures, things that probably will happen, things that might happen. Then there's like wild cards, like the COVID-19 pandemic. It is not a black swan. Black swan is another term popularized by Nicholas Nassim Taleb of a phenomenon that's like completely left field, unanticipated. I mean, COVID-19 was there for a long time, but we just didn't pay attention. So that's, hence, it's wild card. It's one of the futures. And when we understand where the direction we want to head to, we can actually start building protopias and prototypes of the future that we might want to arrive in. And that's the way we can actually, when we do this well, we can start articulating these wonderful nuggets of magic. Like, holy shit, this feels completely out of this world. Like, how did you do that? Well, so like, that's designed for you. The problem here is that us humans are not really built for this, right? So basically, the major source of a lot of disruption happening in the world right now is this, because technology actually progresses further and faster than us humans, our capability to build organizations and these organizations' capability to change, right? So this basically creates the gap between, which causes the friction, and it causes people to actually not understand what is going on and turn into populism, for example. And even in the corporate world, there's this big shift going on from just like regular organizations to agile and then responsive. So things like, this is now a couple of years old, and it's pretty much basic stuff. So from profit to purpose, hierarchies to networks, control to empowering people, from planning to experimenting, from privacy to transparency, and siloed collaboration. Sounds easy, right? But it's, as we've seen in so many agile transformation, it is not. And basically, one thing here is the disclaimer. So tools are not the process. So even us designers, we use all these double downs and whatnot. We think they're tools, but they're not. They do not equal process. So where I come from, Nordcap is a strategic design firm. We're based in Helsinki and Amsterdam. We've been working globally on many different countries, clients for 13 years now. And basically, we help companies find growth and clarity in ambiguous times like this. So we've done things, obviously a lot of mobile apps. Some of the clients we worked with, they sold to Apple. We've helped Aura to Smart Ring to get a piece of funding. And we work with National Railways, electric cars, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of startups with ambitious ideas. And then we've been working with a lot of corporations from Nokia to Fortum to Denso to Telia, all that kind of stuff. And we understand that we also need to chip in to make sense of what's going on in the world. So at the end of January, we published this report called New Normal. So it's a collection of behavioral phenomena relevant to companies now and beyond 2020. So the name kind of like has suffered a slight inflation. I don't know why, but yeah. So could be probably called post-normal nowadays. So our idea behind the name was that in any case, there's no normal anymore. There are always, just as there's multiple normals, there are multiple futures, right? So teams included things like fluidity, supercharged, frontiers, habitualized, etc., etc. So you can actually download this free from our website. So it's nordcap.fi/new-normal. And another thing we've made is something called the Actionable Futures Toolkit. So basically an idea to help organizations and people to envision and build and align their future for the organization and service or product. This is free as well at futures.nordcap.fi. Basically why we do this, we really want to kind of share our tools and thinking to the world, because coming back to complexity, world is a complex place. So when we build an app, let's say we work with a Finnish state railways, VR, so building their app. So kind of like the app's a touch point, and lighten a service which requires an updated brand that lives on all kinds of infrastructures. In order for them to work, they need to figure out new kinds of competencies that change the culture, and that requires new strategies, all that stuff. So even when the touch point is simple like an app, there's a really complex chain of actions and things behind that. So app basically, it's in the store, but just scratches the surface of what needs to be done in order the corporation like to succeed. So we make those tools because we think we need better tools for sense making to actually inform us to make better, more strategic choices. So sense making is by itself the term is invented by Brendan Dervin She's a professor of communication at Ohio State University. And basically, she's researching information, seeking information use. So basically, that led her to understand we need this new kind of methodology to actually verbalize how we make complex ideas tangible. And that's sense making. There are other frameworks as well. So this was could have been pretty kick-ass band and album cover in the 80s, but it's a shame it's not. So it is not a speed metal album cover, even though it looks like that. It's part of a framework, a sketch of a framework called Kneffin. So the illustration is done by Edwin Stoop, and the framework itself is done by Edward Snowden. So it's about complexity, dealing with complexity. The point here is that the world is always in a state of disorder, and then revolves around chaotic, complex, complicated, and simple. The thing here is sort of what I said earlier. So simplicity is kind of like a fad. So when things look simple, they actually break really easily. So this is really interesting, really, really good and deep framework for you to understand more about how to embrace complexity, how to approach that. And if we mash that together with design, you actually start to figure out things that are actually, design is not linear, right? So design, we work in this kind of like chaotic sense of loops of kind of figuring out opportunities and then turning them into experiments, turning them into learning, and then everything goes back to chaotic again. Then complex turns into complicated. And I know this doesn't make any sense, and I'm sorry of that, but you need to check out the framework, then it will. So again, coming back to this, so basically from basic hierarchical organizations, we need to move into something more that's beyond agile, really. So for example, kind of we work with a lot of agile organizations, and they don't understand that agile is just the first step on their transformation. And then they become design-led, so they actually start to understand, all right, so agility runs on efficiency. So hold on, we need to figure out who's the customer, what are the needs, right? And then beyond that, they go into this sort of living, resilient organizations, responsive organization. And then design's role changes. So basically, when we started talking about design maturity and design organization, we started from, all right, design was for styling, then became an activity for users, so designing for users. Then we figure out co-creation, participatory design, so an activity with users. And then it became like business lingo, design thinking, business innovation. And we are now at the point where design and strategic design is actually gaining momentum. So the impact grows. But the thing here is the visibility of what we do changes. So way I see that design needs to go in the background, become a philosophy, even a way of seeing. Because the reason behind that is that I've seen occasions where a lot of organizations talk about themselves as design-led. That actually being design-led has become a problem, right? So, for example, ING, a client in Amsterdam, they ran a brilliant change program, but it was like top-down mostly. And they basically implement all the sort of like Spotify agile rules and whatnot, which basically everyone's doing right now. So beautiful post-it notes, glass walls, Scrum, agile, rituals, whatnot. But what they didn't understand is that people are actually messy and complex. So basically this led to tribes forming silos, competing for resources, causing massive design and development debt. So they basically just replaced one silo with another. And now they're doing much better. But that's kind of like if we take one dogma and basically replace it with another dogma, that's bound to fail. So basically, one really big misunderstanding here is that there's going to be silver bullet frameworks. One framework, one organizational style that works for all the companies. No, there's not going to be one. But every single transformation, every single way of working, every single innovation process needs to be tailored for the company that uses that. And that kind of like, going back to design and us designers, it's a complex place to be in. So we started from symbols, graphic design, went into objects, industrial design, started designing services, systems, and now we design change. And there's a thing called transition design from CMO in the US becoming a thing as well. So design transition, but then the complexity grows. The more we focus on the actual outcomes instead of single outputs. So basically, we need to start figuring out with complexity, chaos, uncertainty, but at the same time, the impact of designers' work grows. This is a challenge. And in order to do this, so basically, you need to be able to lead yourself as well. So not just figure out how to deal with complex problems and deal with complexity, but a whole new sort of seniority. You actually have to be able to lead yourself to be better human at work and in life. So we need to figure out what are our cognitive biases, what is the baggage we bring, and then basically deal with that. What's our shadow we work with? And that's because, I mean, this is from Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. So basically, according to human brain theory, there's like 3 types of brains. So there's the lizard brain, which is the fight or flight, autopilot. Then there's the mammal brain, which is the limbic system, so controls emotions, memories, habits, and makes decisions. And then there's a human brain, which revolves around language, stories, like in the beginning, abstract thought, imagination, consciousness. And that's where the reasoning, the rationalization comes from. So these all happen subconsciously and consciously. We need to be aware of that. In order to thrive in a complex environment, as designers, we need to actually know ourselves as human beings too. So coming back to the 3 things. Ta-da! Improvisation, strategic foresight. So learn the thing on your feet and understand that no projects are alike. Then understand you need to figure out the needs of current users, future users, and the users, they're people, they're human beings. So what are the current human beings? What are the future human beings? What's the current business like? What's the future of that business like? Is there a future? What's the market and competition like now? What is it going to be like in the future? So these are all valid questions to figure out. In order to do that, you need to get better at sense making. You need to get better at systemic thinking, complexity. And in order to do that, you need to figure out how to learn and reflect consciously as individuals, professionals, and as teams and companies as well. So this is the only way we can actually make the possible futures reality. So you need to figure out the original purpose of the company. Purpose is a word that's been thrown around. I promised to get back to this early on. So every company has a purpose, what it's been founded for. every company has internal narratives. So there's rumors, things like, well, that happened, that can't be true. We would try this so many times. So we need to figure out what are these internal narratives, what are the rituals, beliefs, common knowledge. And then we need to actually start figuring out experiments that change and disrupt these loops, to design positive behavioral change within the company. And only then we can actually start designing the possible futures, we can start implement them in the reality. That might mean that design for value could look for something like this. So building based on insight and foresight of current and future humans and business. Actually, we start designing growth, figuring out what's the value proposition of the things we do. Then we move into growth strategies, redefining growth, not just numbers, not just money, but growth is also individual for each company. And only then we get to the stuff us designers know so well. So products and services, touch points, brands, whatnot, design systems. But there's this huge gap before that, which we need to be better at in order to actually reclaim the value we claim design to deliver. And I'm going to end this with a couple of things. So in the end, design is just a tool. So we don't measure a carpenter's abilities by the number of tools they have, but instead of the final outcomes, right? So working as a designer in 2020 beyond in complex organizations, complicated environments can be challenging. So make sure that you actually have yourself centered around what is your own purpose. Well, and make sure to keep that leveled. That makes you a better designer. That will make you anti-fragile and help you to navigate the environment better. And also lead yourself and lead others. Let's see if this audio works. This is a great quote from the master Bruce Lee.
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
So you need to become the water, my friend. So we need to be able to flow and adapt in the surroundings, in the context surrounds us. And that means letting go of our egos to a degree as well. And I want to end you with this quote from Ernest Hemingway, which kind of it's relieving in a way. The first draft of everything is shit. But the point is to get started, get those repetitions in and actually become better at it. By that, I'll say thank you, good luck, and I'll see you live in a couple of minutes, I guess. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sami. That was, I think personally, I felt being blown away in some points because, you know, on one hand, being a designer is being very practical, having very specific skills. And now when we talk about strategic design, then it's more about how to improvise, how to experiment, how to get rid of all the things you already know or the skills that lead you. So maybe my first question to you would be, what are the skills that today that designers have that kind of diminish the power of strategic design? Do you get my question? Maybe it's too hard, but I can rephrase.
It's a good question. It's a big question. So what are the skills diminish? So basically, I'm not sure it's a skill, but we need to learn how to let go of control and let go of perfectionism, for example. So figure out how to actually get started faster and how to build things that or build experiments that help us adapt faster. I don't know if this answers your question, but it's a complex thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
obviously,
don't.
there's going to be a need for the product stuff, kind of like the classic traditional design, but that's more like the operational side of things.
And also, I think if you talk about control, you were also previously telling about ego. So maybe you can. I totally get what you're saying, because I'm dealing with it every day in my life to get rid of ego. So maybe you can give some your personal perspective, or maybe some examples when you really felt that ego was on your way.
It's more like a question of growth over time. So basically, trying to get better at understanding what are my own cognitive biases, for example. Why do I think the way I do? Why do I react the way I do? So it's hard to sort of name one particular example, but I'm sure these things are pretty familiar for anyone dealing with team leadership, for example. So uh, the basic principle being you should always work with people who are smarter than you. So you can actually, you become as a leader an enabler of the work instead of the ultimate authority or opinion. And that's often quite hard for some people.
Okay, but you're working with so many different companies, with so many different leaders, and you definitely have to have the skill also with work with those leaders that would lead you to the future thinking. So, what do you think? How to overcome the egos of other people? Like, what are your tricks there as a designer? How do you make sense for them if you see that their ego is on the way of you to make your proposal understandable or doable for them?
Well, I mean, the first thing here is trust. So you have to, so this applies especially when you're working as a consultant with various different companies. So it always takes time to build the trusted relationship. Sometimes it works faster, sometimes slower, but everything is built on trust. When you trust each other in a room or in a dialogue, for example, then it's much easier to start challenging and also start having the empathy to understand where do the other people come from, why do they think the way they do. Because many things seem simple, but very rarely anything actually is simple. So people have their motivations, their incentives, their own baggage, which all affects the sort of what we call as ego, for example, in a creative process. This basically, my role there is to be the facilitator and help people in the sense-making process, not show them, but take them through the process and help them understand where we go by being part of the process.
Okay, but I will give you an example, and maybe you can think with me here how to overcome this kind of situation. That I've seen this myself, and I've heard about these examples from others. So, as you're also providing your designing skills to other companies, then there are very often these sort of situations where you go with your, let's say, with your branding vision. And you show some mock-ups and you show some logos maybe there and some communication strategy. And then the person responsible says, I don't like it. And you ask, okay, so what don't you like about it? I don't know, but I just don't like it. It's not that, it's not this, it doesn't bring any aha. So you ask, but what do you mean by this aha? Like, what do you want to see? I don't know, you go and figure it out. And I see designers getting really frustrated with this. So maybe you have some good tips how to, crack this sort of reaction and get the essence that makes sense.
Yeah, so that exactly what you described, that is the start of the facilitation, basically. So what I found, like talking on strategy level, talking on kind of going through stuff at high level, when we talk about strategy, anything verbal, that's usually fairly easy. And that's easy to sort of navigate through with other people because it's all words. But when we get into something that's visual, then everyone usually has a different image in their head of like, what do I mean by this expression? So what makes it pop? So what I often do there is I actually facilitate the discussion visually, and that requires the other parties to participate as well. So what do you mean by this? Can you give us examples? What kind of visual style are you looking at here? So basically going through the whole sort of like facilitated process to either examples or just like then depending on the size of the project, time scale of the project with visual iterations. I've done we worked with the smartring company Aura. So doing the app, getting the app out took, I think, 120 something iterations on how does the home screen look like. And that's a question of ego as well. So you can't fall in love with the first version. You have like 119 to go after that.
Yeah, that's true. But so I see other like soft skills that designers need to have here. If you just what you just mentioned, it implies that calmness. The designer needs to be calm, stay calm. 100 iterations, so it's a huge number. You have to stay. Okay, you don't like that. Let's do it over. Okay, let's improve. So it also means that the designer needs to have time. So how would you suggest here for the designer who has, let's say, 10 different projects on the table, how the designer should choose what to go with, into what project the designer should actually spend or invest their time into? Maybe some good tips.
I always try to prioritize based on impact, based on what I find myself, what I find meaningful to myself. So, and I try not to juggle, for example, 10 projects at once, but more like 2 intense sprints of like 2-3 things max at the same time. So that actually gives you, because a lot about this project is about focus as well. And if you're tired, if you're stressed, you can't focus. You can't put in the 100% that is needed, basically. So then you become grumpy, you become anxious. So it's kind of like this sort of like self-feeding cycle in a way. So you need to learn how to focus. And in order to do that, it's like you need to figure out what are the things that are actually meaningful to you. And then when you're lucky, when you work with people, you get to understand what kind of people you like to work with. So so 120 versions, that's an extreme example. And that's not about being a sketch or Figma jockey in a way. Just trying to like, no, this. But it's more like facilitation. It's more about dialogue. So figuring out the power dynamics in the group, figuring out who are, for example, the decision makers there. Like there might be, for example, the CEO, but there might be, for example, the CTO who actually calls the shots. So you need to figure out that kind of, you need to figure out what do they mean with the language they use. And that's kind of like, is more of a facilitation of the components, ideas, style than just like doing versions. So.
Okay, yeah. That does make sense. I think that when you talk about giving your all or giving this, like finding these projects that you would really see the impact that you would like to invest into, that's a very good point. I think that that's one of the key elements for the future designer or the strategic thinker, so to speak. Yeah.
And then there's sort of the flip side of that. So what I think I didn't talk about much in the talk. So I believe you can make pretty much any piece of work, any project meaningful to yourself. You have to be able to reframe the project and the impact in a way that makes sense to you. So what's in it for me here? What is the impact I facilitate? What do I learn here? Things like that. And that's kind of like that's the flip side of that. So when you learn how to do that, it mostly happens to a senior already. Then you can actually make almost anything interesting for yourself. And also you get to say no to some things, because then you know that, well, this is not what I want to do at all.
Good. That's a very good advice. But maybe you can give some, besides Nordkapp, who are your favorite companies who really show the good way of strategic design thinking?
There's so many.
Your top 5, let's say, for inspiration to other designers.
You know, I mean, I don't look that much in the design companies as for an inspiration. But there are a lot of people whose thinking inspires me. I think the guys at Near Future Lab that I showed, that did the IKEA catalog, they've been pushing the idea of like design fiction for a decade already. And they're in terms of design, there's companies that come into mind like Ueno from California. Obviously, IDEO has been really big example, inspiration over the years, and we've been lucky to work with them in the beginning as well. And nowadays tend to gravitate towards like strategy frameworks, authors and medium, and all that kind of stuff. Sci-fi order from Elliot Kim Stanley Robinson. I don't know. I know the answer sucks, but
No, but actually maybe we are out of time, but maybe the last question, like, you know, everybody has been talking about previously, maybe it's not so anymore, but like Apple is kind of the you know, leading the way of design and this future thinking and building the future. Do you also look at Apple?
They do some things really well. Honestly, I think a lot of stuff Apple's doing now, mobile phones, computers, smartphones, it's pretty mundane. So I think smartphones are boring. They've been that for a long time. And there's been rumors about kind of smart glasses and that kind of stuff. But that might be the next wave. But Apple are really, they're the Navy, like they say themselves. So they're really, really super good at executing at highest quality. But then, are they the most futuristic company? I don't know. I don't think so. There are many, many others out there who might not be as successful, but then Apple, actually, they're really good at commercializing stuff at the right time.
Yes. Kiitos, Sami.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. Now, so we're wrapping up today, the third day, and we'll be seeing you tomorrow. But again, going through our partners, Startup Day, Startup Estonia, Velvet, RGB Baltic, who are helping us to bring this event to you. Again, Brella, please use the matchmaking opportunity there. Check out the donation opportunity via PayPal or bank transfer. Estonian Blind Union is really thankful for every euro you're giving them, because they really worry about the accessibility solutions that blind people get these days. And so tomorrow's presentation will be from Jakob Rosin, and he's actually a technological evangelist at Foxmate. He's a real expert in accessibility solutions, so I think that he has some really good tips around how to make technological solutions more accessible for people in need. See you tomorrow, everybody. Thank you.